His 34-year presidency, that lasted from 1876 until 1910, Porfirio Diaz valued the rich foreign citizens in Mexico over the poor indigenous workers and farmers. He implemented many land reforms that took the land from villages and farmers and gave it to the wealthy. This left many people with no land or source of profit, so they were forced to work as slaves under brutal conditions. Mexican farmers began growing bigger cash crops such as sugar, cotton, coffee, henequen, and tropical fruits, which caused food to become more scarce and its prices to go up past the living wage. With all of this suffering and unfair treatment, people would try to speak out, though they were silenced by durallas that would catch people speaking out against Diaz and either send them into slavery or kill them. As more people were being forced into poverty and were unable to speak out, the idea of a revolution began to spark. The government began to weaken back in 1821 during the War for Independence. The war was between Mexico and Spain and had to do with racial equality, land distribution, and overall Spain's power with Mexico. This, however, was a problem because the war wiped out the agricultural, mining, and industrial production that fueled Mexico's economy. It was also a difficult transition from just a colony to a fully self-governed country with its own laws. The War for Independence led to a weakened government because of the resources that were lost in the fighting and redistribution of power that took place. The first intent to overthrow the Mexican government happened after Francisco Madero was exiled for running against Diaz for president. Instead of having a fair race, Diaz exiled Madero to San Antonio, Texas, because he knew Madero would win if he was able to run. Although this ended up not helping Diaz, because while in exile, Madero published the Plan de San Luis Potosi, which was shown around Mexico and widely embraced by rebel groups. The plan was a call to arms from the Mexican people to overthrow Diaz on November 20th, 1910. The plan was a direct call to overthrow the government and to get Diaz out of office, which many rebels and citizens wanted to do. The sparks of the revolution was the Battle of Ciudad Juarez, which took place in May of 1911. The two sides were made up of Madero's army, who were led by Pancho Villa and Pascual Orozco, who were two important rebel leaders, and Diaz's army called the Porfiriatos. Over just 3 days of fighting, the battle was over and the rebel groups claimed victory over Juarez. This caused people to take the revolution seriously and become more proactive in stopping Diaz. The previous government fell when Diaz was exiled to France and Madero took his place. This happened on May 25, 1911, after the Porfiriatos lost multiple battles. Diaz realized he did not have the army necessary to maintain control in Mexico, and he was forced to live in France. Diaz leaving finally gave Madero the opportunity to become president, which he did on November 6, 1911. With Diaz finally gone, there was hope for change within the citizens of Mexico that suffered under his presidency. The transitional government were the three presidents, Francisco Madero, Victoriano Huerta, and finally Venustiano Carranza. These presidents, although not as bad as Diaz, still failed to implement the changes the people of Mexico needed. First of all, Madero failed to follow through with the land reform changes he promised at the start of his presidency, and he was executed on February 22, 1913, making no significant changes in the stability in Mexico. After Madero's execution, Huerta, an army general, took power, although citizens soon realized he was also a dictator like Diaz. Not only did Huerta accomplish nothing while in office, but he also oppressed citizens. He was soon confronted by rebel forces and fled to Spain on July 15, 1914. Lastly, Carranza became president, and although he created the new constitution on May 25, 1917, he did little to implement these new laws that could benefit the citizens of Mexico. This, as well as his feud with powerful rebel leaders, led to his assassination on May 21, 1920. Although these presidents did not make big changes that helped Mexico, they were still instrumental for their ideas and actions throughout the revolution. The final stable government finally came when Alvaro Obregón became president in 1920. Obregón had little education growing up, although he was able to learn about the lives and needs of poor Mexican workers while he was a laborer and farmer. Obregón was the first president during the revolution to create peace and prosperity in Mexico. Some of his policies helped reform schooling and labor organizations. Although he retired from office on December 1, 1924, he was able to implement important laws that were crucial steps needed by the citizens of Mexico. The revolution, which lasted over a decade, ended the lives of nearly 1 million soldiers. After Obregón left office, the new president, Cardenas, led Mexico into a golden age. Due to his support of the arts and literature, more people became interested in culture, education, and political participation. His presidency also led to Mexico using their natural resources, such as minerals and oils. His policies helped ensure the profits from these resources went back to the people, which created an economic boom that lasted for over 20 years. Overall, the Mexican Revolution gave the citizens identity and purpose, and the goals of the revolution were implemented as guidelines for what people needed in the future.